All right, everybody. It is time for our amazing fireside on stablecoins and AI. I want to introduce on the stage Josh, who's the EVP of Policy at Alio, and Sean, the co-founder of Catena Labs. Guys, please, thank you. I got one.
Yeah, it's, can you hear my voice going?
Yes.
Yeah.
Context switching is amazing.
It's a lot, yeah. And I'm not Jeremy. It's not, I don't get more energized as I go. I get worn down.
Me too. Okay, I guess we're on.
Oh, are we on?
Yeah. We take us to the loo.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
We'll try to shepherd more folks, but I think if you guys start, then the conversation.
Oh, you got printed questions and everything?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Let's get things going. Thank you all for joining us. Maybe we can start with a more fulsome introduction. My name is Josh Hawkins. I am at Alio, and we are a L1 and smart contract stack for privacy-preserving blockchain transactions and stablecoin payments. Sean Neville here on my right is the founder and CEO of Catena Labs, an AI-native financial institution that's driving new infrastructure for secure and efficient transactions across AI systems. That's a mouthful.
Did you write that?
Adam did.
Okay.
Sean is also the co-founder of Circle and led the creation and development of USDC. He's had a storied career that always seems to land him at the forefront of major technology disruptions and progress in the industry. I think we're all really excited to learn more about the next project and this new endeavor, Sean.
That sounded super impressive, Josh.
Again, I didn't write it.
Okay.
So maybe we can get started at the beginning, Sean, and maybe just would love to hear the founding vision, the origin story, and what set you on the journey with Catena.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, it's an extension of what we did at Circle. So part of the vision for Circle was democratizing access to the global economy and really, making money work on the internet the same way that data and content worked on the internet. That job isn't done. And so at Catena, what we have moved into is what we think of as the next era, which is an era in which machines are largely transacting, AI actors are largely transacting, negotiating for payments, making payments, executing transactions, earning yield on the assets they hold, and so on. And so we've been working pretty heavily in AI for a number of years, and obviously it's kind of exploded around us, and have discovered empirically, not just in theory, that when it comes to executing financial transactions, stablecoins are simply more reliable than attaching something like credit card APIs and trying to use the legacy systems with these kinds of workflows.
Can we just double click on that a tiny bit and go a little deeper in terms of what the big unlock is for agentic commerce and AI agents when it comes to stablecoins and support for stablecoins across what you're working on?
Yeah, so when it comes to optimizing an AI workflow, and I hesitate to use the word agent because no one can agree on what an agent actually is. Everybody has a different definition, so I just want to sidestep that for a second. But some sort of workflow that has the capability of parsing data, sort of unstructured, semi-structured data, making decisions with it. You really want to parse that kind of information, make a decision at the large language model, maybe with several, we're not choosing a particular model or winner. Closer? When it comes to executing those sorts of decisions and then executing a tool to invoke an API that has a deterministic outcome, we can see very clearly that using that with all manner of traditional Rails simply was not reliable enough. It's easy to make an AI workflow look good in a demo or a proof of concept, but you sort of find out it may be 70, 75% of the way there. And to get it to 3 nines of reliability with existing APIs is really difficult, particularly because of the exceptions that may arise. And so when it comes to executing a stablecoin transaction, even aside from the cross-border settlement and the low fees and all the things we know about, for AI, the fundamental problem isn't so much the economics yet, it's really trust. And why would people trust money into these kinds of workflows? And in order to clear the trust hurdle, we need to show a degree of reliability that we just have not been able to achieve with legacy Rails, and we have been able to achieve that leveraging stablecoins. Turns out AI workflows are very good at signing cryptographic messages, and there's simply fewer participants involved in a transaction as opposed to attaching AI at the edge of a 5, 7, 9-party system, which is, if you use something like a Stripe API, that's ultimately what you're dealing with at credit card rails.
So there are clearly a lot of benefits that you just described, but there are also challenges involved with, using digital dollars on public and transparent blockchains. One being keeping identity and transaction data secure and private, and shielding it from discovery and shielding it from unwanted eyes. So how are you kind of thinking about that problem set of privacy when it comes to the movement of value across these public and transparent blockchains?
I mean, well, the first element of identity is really related to identifying the agent that is attempting to transact. So if you have an agent that's interacting with my agent, how can I be sure it's actually your agent and that it's doing what you want it to do within whatever guardrails you set? Or if I'm buying something from Amazon's agent, if I'm buying something from Amazon's website, there's an SSL certificate that Amazon has, and it's signed by a certificate authority and so on. You didn't actually even think about that stuff. There's some foundational elements that make e-commerce work. But for agent identification, that doesn't exist yet. Now, if you're just using a chatbot in a browser, you can use the same sort of mechanism. But if you have a true agent that is executing transactions, how can I make sure that's actually Amazon's agent that I'm interacting with? And how do I constrain what I do with that to a certain set of policies that I can be sure can't be exceeded? So how can I enforce guardrails? And then, moreover, how can I look back at a decision that was made, say a purchasing decision, and understand why it made that particular decision and audit it effectively? And those 3 elements, sort of, can I be sure this is the agent that I think it is, and I can verify it? And then how can I enforce guardrails around what it's able to do? And then how do I audit its capabilities afterwards? They were pretty natural solutions on blockchain rails for those sorts of things. We actually have the primitives to build agentic identity. A lot of them have been developed in a sort of domain of decentralized identity standards for humans and for businesses. They've never really taken hold there, but it turns out they're a pretty nice fit in the similar vein to what I was talking about with stablecoins. Pretty nice fit when it comes to KYA or know your agent sort of standards. So that's the first step. The second piece that you mentioned was more data privacy in the context of what you share with an agent. And so there are some guardrail constraints around that as well. There are things like private deployments and making sure that the data that's injected for a tools call or even for LLM handling, handled safely with privacy options. But honestly, the engagements that we work with, everyone talks about that. But when it comes to really integrating an agentic flow, nobody cares yet. We had a thesis that they would care, or at least be required to care based on some internal IT requirements or something. Just like we had a thesis that people cared about the economics and the price of using these large language models. But it turns out the thing that people care about right now in these early days is just how can I make this agentic workflow reliable at all? And people's anecdotal experiences are with things like Claude or ChatGPT or whatever that just hallucinate a terrible recipe to make chocolate chip cookies. Why would I trust it with my money? And so really clearing that reliability hurdle is the most important thing, and everyone is really focused on how to get there. How to make a non-deterministic machine have deterministic outcomes that doesn't fail 1/4 of the time, or worse, think that it succeeded and not actually succeed in an unsafe manner. And so that's really the first hurdle. We do that with verifiable identity and KYA, and we sort of propose some solutions for that we just think should be open standards for anybody to be. Nobody should be able to own that. It should just be open standards like we have for SSL or HTTPS. Nobody owns that. Google doesn't own that. Microsoft doesn't own it. Right now, there's a little bit of a rush for vendors to own the agent identity solution. Like Google does have a proposal. There are a lot of startups that have proposals. Cloudflare has like 6 proposals. And And there isn't really this coming together yet. It's a bit fragmented, but we think there should be an open standard for those things. And then once we clear the trust hurdle, partly with those primitives in place, we'll be able to address these other issues such as data privacy in actual transactions, which we're in the meantime not seeing at volume. That was a mouthful answer there, but
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. So AI and stablecoins are at the center of a lot of noisy policy debates happening right now, especially with the Genius Act sort of coming into force and rulemaking right now. How do you? This is just sort of.
to read that for you.
What's that?
Do you want me to read that for you?
Yeah, please. So, how do you balance the rigors of the highest levels of kind of compliance and those standards with kind of the agility and speed that's required of building and launching an AI financial product and platform?
So we can talk about the Genius Act first, I guess. So, when I wrote the first white paper, as for USDC in 2017, it was 8 years ago now that we did that. There was very limited support for it, even at Circle internally. And this is why we had a team of like 6 people on it, because there wasn't a lot of support for it, let alone with banking partners and other partners in the ecosystem, let alone with regulators. And so now you sort of come forward to this summer, and we've seen the U.S. dollar stablecoin model of this is how you manage reserves. These are the consumer protections that need to be enforced, and so on. It's encoded into law, and so it's been a tremendous advancement for us. It doesn't solve all of our problems, but it does define the regulatory hurdle that previously was just not defined at all. So you didn't know if you were staring at a big flat wall or like how do you actually clear it, which prevented people from people outside the crypto community, but people in institutions and other domains really leaning in for the kinds of use cases that we were most excited about, which is not so much in crypto capital markets, which is where you see the 2 dominant US dollar stablecoins today have kind of a liquidity moat, but these other use cases related to true payment use cases. And those are just beginning to be unlocked because there's a clear regulatory definition of how the US government views these things. There's a playbook for people to execute on. Which is exciting because it moves the next big challenge to another set of hurdles to clear around things like interoperability and how do you solve interoperability in a way that can lead to liquidity for other stablecoins and other issuers. So there's been a tremendous investment on that advancement on that side. So it's trying to tie that into to AI a little bit. It does, it was the case, say, a year ago when I would go to AI engineer, meetups and talk to people who are working with tuning those workflows. I didn't mention the word stablecoin because it in that community was viewed so toxic because of its connection to crypto that people refused to have a further conversation, and that's completely flipped the other way. Now there's really been an embracement embrace whatever of the stablecoin concept by people in that community, which means they begin to innovate and they start working with it. And some of the things that people are discovering are the same thing I mentioned. Yes, there are advantages to sort of low-fee, fast cross-border settlement, but the most important problem, again, with AI workflows is making them reliable and trustworthy. And if they're going to be transacting, stablecoins actually do help those workflows accelerate to getting to that point. I guess the last point is maybe you were alluding to AI regulation, and the general thesis on that is there's many different points of view on it. Reid Hoffman has this kind of category of how people look at AI, and there's kind of the doomers, which is like the Terminator is going to come kill us all. The gloomers, which is largely in the media, which is like you're giving it way too much credit. It's all where's the ROI? And then there's the zoomers, which is just we just got to keep going forward. Like some China scare, China's either going to do it better than you, and all these sorts of things. But obviously, Reid views himself more as a bloomer, which is the category that I put myself in, which is we're seeding many, many things. Many of these things are going to grow to be very positive for all of us. Some of these things will have to be cut. And so how do we thoughtfully and intentionally go about the pruning and the cutting? And how should that be reflected in regulation that is appropriate for where we are right now in the AI race, which has already become a geopolitical issue? So it's kind of 3 different things jumbled in there to the answer you got.
That's great. So the financial services technology stack is like super complicated, very interconnected, and reading through some of your background materials, it became evident that you're sort of inserting this enablement across all the different layers of the stack, how do you prioritize? Or maybe for this audience, maybe you could talk a little bit about what that stack looks like and how are you prioritizing your efforts and investments?
At Catena, yeah. So we're executing on two different work streams. And I say it's almost like the work streams are more like the sections of a pyramid, and that the first work stream is very foundational. And so, when I was young, starting my first companies, along with Jeremy, who's obviously co-founder at Circle, we spent a lot of effort on web standards and internet standards because we wanted to build commercial products on top of standards that people came together to contribute to. And so we feel the same is necessary in AI. And so we have a work stream that's very devoted to common patterns and practices around agentic identity, using verifiable credentials and the like, providing guardrails that can be enforced at an agentic level, but also enforced at transactional level on blockchains, smart contracts. And so that is really more sort of a foundational level that is a public good. We'll continue working on that, but we need it to be in place in order to build what's on top of that foundational layer, which is our commercial product. And the way to think about that is, I know it's been called a bank, and I understand why it's been called a bank. It is really more of a new kind of financial institution. So it is a licensed financial institution. We can't have our agents licensed because they can't get fingerprinted, and you still need to do that. So we get the licenses, and then we're building agentic workflows that use those licenses. And so ultimately, it's a financial institution that's built all internally with AI workflows, with humans in the loop to monitor those workflows. And we think eventually our actual customers will also be AI actors, as AI actors need to get paid, earn yields, have credit facilities, and so on. In the near term, we're not there yet. So we're building for the people who are building those kinds of workflows. But to give you an example of an internal AI workflow, one is in compliance. And so, at Circle, we have, a number of amazing human beings who sit down every day, God bless them, and look for AML patterns and file suspicious activity reports and the like. We do the same thing, but we do it entirely with agents. And so we have one human that oversees that workflow, and agents are very reliable, open cases, and gathering evidence and filing stars and so on. And so that's an example in the compliance piece, but we really approach the same thing across the board. Some workflows are better than others, and they're never sort of just done and good. It's a constant practice of tuning them. So the humans that work, say, in compliance have a different job than they would in a traditional FI, and that a lot of the job is overseeing this orchestration of multiple agents that are working together and becoming familiar with, frankly, data science practices so that they can execute, so they can constantly tune and have the workflows execute effectively. So,
do you see the agents that you're sort of enabling at these various levels of the tech stack, do you see it as additive or sort of optimization or full-on wholesale kind of replacement? What's your vision for the future, looking ahead a little bit?
So I think it depends on the job, and so it's hard to make a general blanket statement. I'm not a fan of the sort of digital worker metaphors because that sounds like an outright replacement, and that you can just sort of anthropomorphize an AI agent and it does the job of a human being, and it's really not exactly like that. It is more the case that, take software engineering, so AI is completely transformed software engineering today. There's still a role for senior software engineers, like principal level sort of architects who can review, say, code that is generated by a series of LLMs, or LLMs that are even reviewing PRs or the like. So, but the job of that principal level architect is a little bit different than it might have been a few years ago, pre-AI. And so then the question becomes, well, how does a junior level become the senior level? And I think that this is true in software engineering, but it'll be true in many domains. I think jobs will change, and therefore people will need to be trained differently. I think the coursework in universities will change as a result, and so on. And so we're in a little bit of this time period shift where we're not there yet. And people are at the same time sort of overestimating the capabilities of AI right now today in some of these roles because they haven't clearly defined structurally where they're good and where they're not, maybe not so effective. And at the same time, it is the case that many certain kinds of roles will completely disappear because they'll be done by machines, as has always been the case as we've advanced technology.
So, Sean, I want to pop up a level and just, given the tremendous work that you did at Circle and with USDC, for the startups and builders in the audience, What would you say are some of the big lessons learned that can be applied? What's the pattern recognition that you might be able to share as people get going in the space?
Yeah. So one thing I would say about the work that we did at Circle, this is actually counter to common and good advice to founders. So maybe I'll couch it in those terms. So the typical founder's advice is to you really got to zoom in on product market fit, and in order to zoom in on PM fit, find one ideal customer. So find an ideal customer profile, define it, find their pain points, and go after just that. And so at Circle, what we did that was a little different is we defined several customer profiles. And the advantage to doing that is that if you're successful with it, over a longer period of time, you can create a platform that satisfies many different kinds of customers, rather than just zeroing in on, say, Jim from accounting and whatever problem he has. And then, so it was a much longer play. And so we're applying the same thing to what we're doing with the AI financial institution today. This is not a find your way to, $1 million ARR and then double it and then triple it or whatever. This is, let's create a generational company at a point in time where the world is changing. And many of these forces, regulatory, blockchain technology, AI, are converging in an interesting way so that we can capitalize on them. And so we're certainly repeating that. The other side is on the regulatory side. We spent a lot of time also, as you know, educating regulators in the early days of Circle when they really did not want to talk to us because they didn't think we needed to be regulated. They didn't know what we were doing. We sort of insisted we're at least a money service business and spent a lot of time educating them at the state and at the federal level. And the bet was that, ultimately, in order for things like dollars on blockchains to be accepted by the United States government, and not to be a fringe thing, but to be accepted by the United States government, it was going to need to be encoded in law. And that's hard. It takes a long time to have this sort of, policy advancements. And so similarly, not being afraid of taking a big swing that needs to unfold with many kinds of constituents and partners over a longer period of time. That is, in my view, how you build, a generational company. And so those are certainly lessons that we're taking from Circle.
So, Sean, looking back at the past 10 years, past decade, or actually, in your case, a couple decades of accomplishment and driving a lot of disruption and change, and maybe looking ahead to the next 5 to 10 years. I know in the AI space it could be 5 to 10 minutes, or it's the rate of delivery is incredible. What are your hopes and dreams for the space? Looking ahead in the next 5 to 10 years. Like, what do you see? What do you want to see?
Well, I'm very optimistic. I mean, I think if we get this right, it'll be one of the most powerful forces for humanity that the world's ever experienced. I also think if we don't get this right, the results could be catastrophic. So the pace of change is fast. So far, that's not to say that it will continue at the same rate and sort of exponential growth. We may hit some walls and some ceilings along the way, but it has been faster, at least on the large language model side of it. And obviously, when we started working with AI, it was not in LLMs; it was in more machine learning. And but certainly in the LLM space, the growth has been faster than anything I've ever experienced. It's certainly faster than developments in crypto, but also anything else that I've done prior to that. And it's sort of it's synthetic acceleration because AI is accelerating AI growth. But at the same time, I do think that we're farther away from things like AGI than some of the the predictions that I hear, because we're still at a point where there is no real intelligence in these LLMs. They're doing token completion. They're very effective at parsing data and doing certain things, but it's the phrase is that it's really more ghosts in the machine than sort of spirit animals at this rate. So it's hard to say. The hardest thing of all to say, or at least for me, the hardest thing of all to say is not what you see or what the vision might be, but when certain pieces of it might occur. And it will occur in different domains at different times, and I'm sure there will be surprises, along the way, as there was with the internet, as there has been in crypto, and as there surely will be with AI developments as well.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating, Sean. And where can we learn more about what you're doing? How do we get involved?
Yeah, so we're still in, believe it or not, despite standing here talking, we're still in semi-stealth mode. This doesn't seem, this doesn't seem very stealthy, but we have a little, some information up on containalabs.com, and we've released some open source patterns in conjunction with partners that we've worked with at agentcommercekit.com. And so those are two places where you can see more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sean. Just curious if we have time for a few audience questions. I take that as a yes. Time for a couple questions? Take a couple questions.
My voice is like really almost gone.
Question time?
You guys kind of alluded to it earlier. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell here in my loud-ass voice. What do you think in terms of, I know you said right now you're not seeing a lot on the privacy demand, but for agentic payments in the future, do you think that will be a requirement similar to HTTPS and SSL, TLS for agentic payments?
Yeah, I think that absolutely. I mean, I think that generally of payments. So that's why I'm such a fan of privacy-preserving payment blockchains. Everyone seems to be building an L1 these days. So everyone from obviously us, or us being Circle in that case, to the team working on Tempo and several others. But I think that there is a need for a dedicated payment-oriented chain, and that successful chain, is this still working? The successful chain is going to have some privacy-preserving features to it, absolutely. There are a bunch of other things that I want to see. Say sub 300 millisecond, final settlement. I want to see gas fees paid in stablecoins, not in a chain token. I don't want to have to compete with meme coins for block space if I'm making a payment. There's like a bunch of things that I want to see in a payment-oriented chain, but privacy preservation is absolutely one. On the AI side, we also need transparency into how AI is making decisions. So in some cases, in terms of getting enough data context without revealing anything sensitive to understand how an AI made a certain decision, and being able to go back and retrace steps so that you can repeat that decision is also going to be very important.
You mentioned quite a few points in terms of regulation, and obviously there is some conductive regulation now in the US, but how do you see that playing out at the global level in terms of facilitating both Web3 and AI use more globally, more widely, I guess?
Sorry, couldn't quite hear it. Yeah, sorry.
It's more like on the regulation side. So you said like on the US, obviously there is some constructive regulation now being panned out. How do you see that playing out at the global scale with European regulations, Asian regulation? How do you see the integration, and what can we do to better approach that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, on one hand, I think you can't put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, and so no nation state wants to enforce regulation that hinders their own state's innovation or advancement in AI, and don't want to put themselves behind others. And at the same time, there's a lot of concern around, well, just generally speaking, AI safety, but more specifically to AI financial flows. How do we provide some sort of floor so that any AI that is executing payments needs to at least clear that floor in terms of proving that it is reliable and transparent and auditable and all of these sort of things. And so it's that level of regulation that I think we, regardless of regulation on AI in other ways, sort of at the chip level and the large language model, the foundational model development level, at that level, taking a lesson from AI safety sort of eval guidelines and being able to put that initially in place as guidance, so that payment processors and others, people who are building agents, can see the barrier that they need to clear, and then moving toward that being a common standard, whether it's in Europe, Asia, or so forth. That's the path that I would personally see, or personally like to see evolve. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Sean.
All right. Yep. Thanks.